as we speak. With me here in studio, founder of Inside the Middle East Institute, Mr. Avi Melamed, Ariel Saran, Middle East correspondent, I-24 News, a senior defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev. Gentlemen, we've been listening to the statement by the IDF spokesperson, Mr. Melamed. What do you make of it?
Well, as I said, we are in war. We are looking at a mega event. We are actually, to the best of my assessment, in the very early stage of this mega event. We are expecting not only upcoming hours, tough hours, but more than that, to the best of my evaluation. We are looking at something that, in the end of the day, has enormously regional ramifications.
Yes, the region will not stay the same, that's for certain. Before we dive in further into this, Ariel Saran, just perhaps an update on what is happening on the northern front. For the first time today, there seems to be some movement there, let's put it that way.
Indeed, movement is the way I was planning on putting it as well. First of all, there was an incident of dozens of Shiite supporters, Hezbollah and Amal political supporters with the flags, riding on motorcycles near the border. They were sent away by warning fire from Israeli forces. But there are also reports that, given what's going on now, Hezbollah is on high alert, and UNIFIL, the peacekeeping forces, also reports that it is hunkering down in its bases along the border. Now, with the eyes set to the northern border, U.S. President Joe Biden weighing in on this and saying, after his phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, in which he conveyed the United States' full support, standing alongside Israel, President Biden warned any additional player from entering the conflict, from taking advantage of the situation and joining in. So indeed, very this is a power play by the U.S. president to show his unwavering support to Israel, but indeed, fog of war still going on in multiple areas in southern Israel.
Yes, Avi Melamed, I do want to go back to you, since the comparisons to the Yom Kippur War, and again, I'm mentioning it since the early hours of this morning, but it's impossible not to. 50 years plus a day since the Yom Kippur War broke out by complete surprise. The main difference, if I may, Mr. Melamed, is that over 2,200 soldiers were killed during the Yom Kippur fighting against two of the strongest armies of the region, were killed back then to prevent the situation that we're seeing unfolding as we speak, of women, children, and elderly being held hostage at their homes by terrorists.
Yes, actually, the recent point is the major difference in the end of the day, because this is the first time, to the best of my recollection, that since 1948, Israeli communities located inside Israel has basically taken over by the enemy.
Fighting in the streets of Israel.
Fighting in the streets of Israel. So this is one of the major differences. There are similarities between the story of Yom Kippur. Obviously, there are some differences, as you mentioned. One of them, of course, is the whole story of the operational and intelligence failure that I hope and believe will be thoroughly studied.
Yes, for sure, and judging by history, maybe for decades, will be debated. But before we discuss the diplomatic channels or the regional players that are in the mix here, Mr. Melamed, we do want to briefly head back down south to Ariella Rosenthal, resident of the southern city of Ashdod. Ariella, thank you very much for joining us. I will start by asking, how are you?
If I compare myself to the other cities south of Ashdod, we are okay. It's rather quiet now. For more than 2 hours, we haven't had any siren. But the situation, if we look at the broader aspect, it's the whole of the southern part of Israel, which has been on constant bombardment for the years, and especially now. So it's frightening, and trying to cope with it. We believe in and follow the guidelines and restrictions of the Home Front Command, and hopefully we will deal with the situation.
Ariella, what goes through your mind throughout these hours? You're obviously at home in a self-imposed lockdown yourself, but hearing the reports of what's happening outside, what goes through your mind as an Israeli, as a southern resident?
I'm originally from South Africa. I came to Israel when I was 12. This is my country. I believe in my country. We are the right for security and sovereignty. This is a war that has been opposed by terrorist groups, a branch of Iran that is sitting on the border on the south of Israel, and of course the north. And we also must look at the West Bank. And I feel, it's a scenario that is not real. The state of Israel is a state that's looking after her security. We have the right for our sovereignty. Yes, so this is a surprise. If as a citizen here, we didn't expect such a scenario and to wake up to a war,
to a nightmare, a living nightmare.
This is a nightmare, but we are strong. And I'm sure that and hope that my government knows exactly what to do. But this is not acceptable at all.
That's perhaps an understatement. Ariella Rosenthal, we're sending strength from here to you and obviously to the rest of Israel's southern residents. Thank you very much for speaking to us and stay safe and resilient, of course.
Thank you very much.
And we're seeing live images from the skyline of the city of Gaza as we speak. Jonathan Regev, briefly before we move to the concluding remarks of Mr. Avi Melamed here, what can you tell us about the active scenes down south? We are seeing that some aerial attacks begun in the Gaza Strip, likely to be just the tip of the iceberg once this first stage we're still experiencing will be over.
Yes, the aerial attacks, but they're if we remember any of the previous operations in Gaza, it's more of the same.
Right.
This is not a stage that we've not seen. There's a government meeting and another cabinet meeting later on tonight. The decisions have to be taken there. I would really not expect the Israeli response to be as in previous times, because this is not any incident like in the previous times. Mega event, as it was called here, that is it. I would expect the Israeli response to be the same, treating this as a mega event, something completely different, by far the biggest attack on Israeli citizens, and it has to be treated as such, and it has the response has to be such that sends a message to Hamas. If the Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant said they did a mistake, they have to feel that, and everybody else, the entire arena looking at us now, should also understand that it was a mistake.
A definitive moment, a pivotal moment in reshaping Israel's position in the Middle East and the Middle East altogether. Avi Melamed, before we move to your concluding remarks, now confirmed 100 Israelis killed and 1,000 wounded. Opposition leader Yair Lapid speaking. I call on everyone to adhere to the security establishment instructions. I will not deal with who is to blame and why were we surprised. It is not the time, not the place. We will stand united against our enemies. The state of Israel is at war. It will not be an easy war. It will not be a short war. It will have far-reaching strategic ramifications that we have not seen for years. There is a great risk that it will turn into a multi-level, multi-front war. I have just concluded a meeting with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, and I informed him that at this point, I am willing to put all the differences aside and establish a unity government, an operational unity government to command over this unfolding situation. At this point of the dysfunctioning state of the security cabinet, you cannot manage a war. The state of Israel needs a professional, experienced, responsible political level to lead the country. I have no doubt that my colleague in the opposition, Benny Gantz, will join such a unity government as well. We are standing united against the IDF and the Security Cabinet, such a government will make it clear to the international community that the State of Israel is standing united against every foreign threat. The State of Israel is experiencing a difficult blow. We are all hurt. We are all. But such operations you do not conduct out of emotions, but cool-headedly. You need a government that will manage this war resolutely until the complete victory over our enemies. Yes, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid saying that he offered Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to set up a unity government that will be able to manage to calculate Israel's future steps in this war, that will stand united domestically and internationally. Mr. Avi Melamed, you're hearing the opposition leader with us. Is that the right thing to do at the moment?
Yes, well, I would like to suggest an interesting perspective. Basically saying this is kind of like a strategic opportunity for the State of Israel and the United States of America to set a different agenda and to set the course in the different parts of the Middle East differently as it was up until now. Just to put it in the wide context, for the last couple of decades, Israel has been facing a growing intimidation by Iran and its proxies. Basically, we know that Iran has a master plan of creating what they call the ring of fire surrounding Israel from Syria, from Lebanon, from Gaza Strip. Today, the Gaza Strip arena was activated. This is an interesting moment of opportunity, strategically speaking, for the State of Israel and the United States. And by the way, the statement by the United States sending clear warning to other players in the region, namely Hezbollah and Iran, this is a very interesting development. This could be an opportunity for the State of Israel and the United States of America to dismantle the biggest strategic threat that the State of Israel is facing and to generate a process of substantial change in the region. There is one condition. In order to do that, Israel has to eliminate Hamas.
But if I understand you correctly, Mr. Melamed, Hamas is a target to be eliminated, a route to sending more than just a message to Iran.
It's more than a message. It's dismantling Iran master plan. If you are tomorrow morning taking out of the equation that the Iranian has been building the story of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, then the Iranian and Hezbollah are facing a very interesting dilemma. Because here is the thing. In the last couple of months, time and again, people were talking about what they call the uniting of arenas, basically talking about a scenario where all enemies of Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, maybe elements in Syria, will come together and attack Israel at the same time simultaneously. Here is something very interesting. I'm not so sure that Hezbollah really want to be dragged into this conflict at this stage. If Israel is going to initiate a massive ground operation in Gaza Strip, which is a very likely scenario, and this is going to result in the end of the day, the crumbling of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip, here is the dilemma that Iran and Hezbollah are facing. Are they going to throw Hezbollah into the fight or not? This is an interesting pivotal moment. This is a moment that could generate a leverage of strategic change, positively speaking, for the State of Israel, the United States and their allies in the region. The region is looking, as Jonathan mentioned accurately, everybody today is looking around in the region. And one last note in that comment, in that perspective maybe, many people in Gaza Strip and in the Arab world will shed no tears if Hamas and Islamic Jihad will be off the table.
On that note, yes, a lot to unpack here. A busy hour of statements on behalf of Israeli officials, speaking to the public, trying to clear the clutter of this still chaotic scene that we're seeing in recent hours in Israel. Jonathan Regev, I do want to circle back to what we've heard from opposition leader Yair Lapid right after his meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of yet another security cabinet meeting to convene later on in the evening. What should the political leadership do? What will it do?
What will it do? I don't know. There's so much animosity inside the Israeli political spectrum that we simply cannot know. The logical answer would be yes. Now, in times of emergency, as has happened before, a unity government should be formed. This is what should happen. Will it happen? I don't know. We just heard the head of the opposition saying we've offered Netanyahu to join in a sort of an emergency government. We also heard Benny Gantz, who's officially not the head of the opposition, but is the strongest figure within the opposition, with his very high poll numbers, and also a former chief of staff, a former minister of defense, also saying that now it's not
Jonathan, let's take a listen. Let's hear it from Benny Gantz himself, former defense minister, former IDF chief of staff, Benny Gantz earlier this evening.
We say unequivocally and in a clear voice, the Israeli people are united behind the security forces. The government has our full support to exact a heavy, painful and effective price, so this will never happen again. The response should be and will be sharp and painful, one that will be burned in their minds for many years. You may be able to surprise Israel, but it is impossible to defeat it. We have proven this before and we will prove it once again.
All right, before we continue discussing what would happen in the coming hours, let's circle back to this very hour, to this point in time. Ariella Saran with us here in studio. As we speak, constant barrages of rockets towards Israel's south. This has been the case since 6:30 a.m. And continues to be as such. Several active scenes in the south, meaning still Hamas terrorists in control over Israeli communities and the IDF and military bases, and the IDF confirming that Israelis are civilians and soldiers alike being held hostage in the Gaza Strip by Hamas terrorists. Let's try and get a clear picture.
Right, Ellie, you said that there's an abundance of remarks to the public. This is happening 10 hours after the incidents began, and that is way too long for the Israeli public to get initial answers as to what's going on. That's first things first. Now, as to your question, yes, there have been constant barrages of rockets towards southern Israeli communities, as well as non-stop Israeli airstrikes, which have been going on since for the past 5 hours. Roughly, it took 5 hours after this all started for the Israeli Air Force to be activated and starting to attack Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. I do, given a day like this that pretty much all of us were blindsided, we do need to also move our focus to what's happening in the West Bank this evening. There's clashes in multiple points, 3 Palestinians killed in exchanges of fire with Israeli forces in Ramallah and Jericho. That is something to look out for. As well, the IDF has closed the route of Hawara. The entire Palestinian village of Hawara has been closed in anticipation.
Hotbed for weeks, for months.
But in anticipation for reprisal attacks by Israelis in a night like this. So again, we need to make sure that we don't lose our focus in addition to what's going on in the northern border, as well as what's happening in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
Mr. Avi Melamed still with us here in studio as well. The UN Security Council likely to meet tomorrow in the afternoon. Who knows what will be the situation there, but let's discuss the international, I wouldn't say reactions, but the international leeway Israel is having, will have for at least quite some time. How should Israel maneuver this situation? The conversation between, in the aftermath of the conversation between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and American President Joe Biden earlier today, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin saying that the Pentagon will make sure Israel has everything it needs to defend itself. This is the way it was phrased, meaning, go ahead.
Well, as I said before, look, I think that the American administration is starting to read accurately the strategic turn point that we can see here, because it's very unlikely reaction by the American administration. Obviously, they understand the scale and volume and magnitude of this mega event. They understand the thing cannot go back to normal as
There
they
is
were
no
yesterday.
going back from
There is
this
no
point.
going back.
Yeah.
And maybe the American administration, and by the way, as part of its policy currently in different parts of the Middle East, in Iraq, in the Gulf area, where the American administration is recently starting to show more and more muscles, relatively speaking, maybe the American administration in that perspective can see or identify this strategic opportunity, and it goes back to what I said, the message coming from the United States is very significant. There are other things that have to be taken into consideration when we're talking about the American administration and the story of a possible scenario of what we're going on or what we're going to see in the next couple of days. But here is the point. If there is going to be a massive Israeli ground operation in Gaza Strip, all calculations are becoming irrelevant. You are looking at an event that is totally spinning out of control, condemning or not condemning international community.
Reality dictates what is happening.
What will happen on the ground will, at the end of the day, will dictate many things that has to do with the diplomacy. But in the context of the American administration, here is something very significant. Biden administration, in the context of the possible agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, one of the major obstacles that Biden administration has to face with is the own issue within its own ranks of Democratic party, because he needs the support of the Democrat members to move on with such an agreement with Saudi Arabia as part of a triangle agreement with Israel. If there is going to be a massive ground operation in Gaza Strip with everything that comes along with that, and that it's going to be messy and bloody and terrible, the Democratic and particularly the progressive part within the Democratic Party in the United States will obviously make Biden's life more difficult and most possible will put more obstacles on the path towards some sort of like breakthrough with the Israeli and Saudi discussion. But in the end of the day, I think that the most significant thing to say right now, when you look at the whole picture, when you look at the Northern Front, when you look at Gaza Strip, when you look at the region, when you look at the story of Israel, United States and Saudi Arabia, when you look at the Iranian master plan of the Ring of Fire, I think the most significant thing right now is to identify the strategic opportunity and to play together with the United States and other regional players to solve some sort of like a long-term strategic plan that has stages, and the ultimate purpose of that long-term strategic plan should be, in the end of the day, to dismantle the Ring of Fire that the Iranian regime has been building for the last couple of decades. Gaza Strip could be the starting place.
To get a clear sense of what the end goal looks like and to move backwards from there.
You want to enter this situation when you are looking already beyond the horizon and saying to yourself, what is the reality that I want to shape, and who are the partners that I can bring with me that will help me to do that?
Avi Melamed, do stay with us because we are heading back to the south. I-24 News correspondent Pierre Clochendler at the Barzilai Hospital in the southern city of Ashkelon. Pierre, officials' numbers continue to rise. 100 Israelis confirmed dead, killed, murdered in today's slaughter down south. Over 1,000 injured, dozens in critical condition. What can you tell us, Pierre?
Well, we'll see the partial tally here of what has been going on since 6:30 a.m. You see an incessant and gory ballet of ambulances that come to Barzilai Hospital. There's about 242 wounded here. 39 are fighting for their lives. 9 or 10 or maybe even more are in critical condition. 120, over 120 are in moderate condition. The hospital is so overwhelmed that some moderately wounded people are transferred to hospitals further up north in the country because there is not enough room here. And there is a long wait with people waiting to hear from their dear ones, hoping that their dear ones will be in the hospital, will be here, transported, evacuated to the emergency room, which is just behind me. Now, one woman, for instance, is looking for her uncle who was at the rave party. Another woman, her sister is a paramedic. She's probably a hostage in the Be'eri community, or maybe she doesn't know what her condition is, and she's been here for the past 4 hours, and people are just waiting. People that have close relatives that they don't know where they are, but also paramedics, ambulance drivers, stretcher carriers, surgeon. Everybody is waiting for the next wounded to be coming here. And this is the reality in this place right now, which is quite protected. You can see that we are in some sort of protected area. And there was a loud explosion about 3 hours ago, just nearby, and a rocket landed. The pediatric emergency ward of the hospital was hurt by shrapnels, but luckily all the children had been evacuated previously to a protected area. And this is the reality that the people are facing here. The ambulances, the paramedics, the civilians. We've seen soldiers being carried on stretchers. Everybody, the whole society is coming here as a microcosm and in an incessant turnover. Ellie?
Pierre Clochendler, down south, the Barzilai Hospital. Thank you very much for this, Pierre. We will, of course, get back to you later on in the evening. Thank you, Pierre. We want to speak now to a resident of Ashkelon, one of many Israeli citizens glued to any piece of information throughout the day, terrified by what is currently unfolding right outside the window. Avishag Avinoam, resident of Ashkelon, is joining us. Thank you very much, Avishag. How are you doing?
I can say a little bit overwhelmed from the situation. Nobody expected that to happen. It was so surprising. We still trying to process because we all know someone that or got hurt or maybe died or abducted. So we all know someone that knows someone. So it's kind of a black day for the entire southern of Israel and the entire Israel in general, because there were many wounded who are soldiers, a lot of casualties in the party that held place in the desert. So everybody knows somebody. So it's a dark day for Israel.
You know, Avishag, we are trying to complete the pieces of the puzzle of what is happening throughout the day. So I'm asking you to help us to try and illustrate, to describe what happened here in Israel in the past 12 hours now since 6:30 a.m. This morning. What have you been hearing? What have you been hearing from people you've been in touch with? What have you been seeing right outside your window in the southern city of Ashkelon?
So, as you probably know, it's a holiday here in Israel. So I'm at my parents' house together with my brother and his two young children. We all gather to celebrate, and the sirens caught us by surprise, 6 a.m. in the morning. We were not expecting that whatsoever. And then from there, it was unfolded story. It was just, we tried to get pieces of information, if it's from the media, which were very, very short of information, which also I think it's a lack of the government not informing media outlets and in general the citizens about something like that can happen during the holiday. I don't believe there were not at all intelligence about what's going to happen. Maybe the amount of rockets that they have sent from Gaza, it was just to distract us from the infiltration. But the government should have, if they had any piece of information, they should have notified the citizens to be in safe places, because many were not. Many came to the south to be with their families instead of doing the opposite, instead bringing their families from the south to central or northern Israel. But this didn't happen because until maybe I think 3 o'clock in the noon, we didn't have any clue what is going on. all the information we got was from WhatsApp groups, social media. That's it. We didn't have any imagination of what actually is happening on the field, on the ground. And once we got to know the amount of casualties and the way they died, and it was just horrific. It was just something chilling, and that I don't know if there is any person in Israel right now that is able to understand the tragedy that just happened
it's
today.
incomprehensible to everyone. Still, at this point in time, 12 hours since this war broke out, and we're still trying to get a clear sense of the bigger picture, while the small pieces of the puzzle are getting clearer. Still, uncertainty reigns the streets here in Israel this evening. Avi Melamed joining us live from the southern city of Ashkelon. Stay safe. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And yes, we will tune back in with you and with the rest of the southern residents of Israel later on in our broadcast. Back here with us in studio, Jonathan Regev, IDF. I-24 News, senior defense correspondent. Let's try and recap what we know about the active scenes as we speak. Multiple fronts, multiple challenges. Let's again try to recap what is the current state of affairs.
Multiple fronts. First, there are still communities where there are terrorists. We didn't get any word on these situations ending. We have at least two communities where we know that there are hostages. We're speaking of hostages still inside Israeli territory, held by Hamas terrorists. So these are things that are still happening now. That's apart from the very large number of people that we know were killed, and we heard the figures. We know that there are people who have been kidnapped to Gaza. The numbers are unclear at the moment, and it's a very dramatic event that will require a dramatic response. For now, the main focus now is making sure that all of the terrorists that are inside Israel are killed, and no more hostages are held within Israeli territory. It may take hours, it may even take days until that is completely clear. Then comes the second stage of some sort of an attack into Gaza. I agree with what was said here. This is not a regular attack which demands what I think we can call the regular response and operation, a few days of fire exchange, and that's it. This is something of a completely different magnitude. Will this government, will this prime minister take the decision to go all into Gaza? Of course, it's something that we have to wait and see. There are many decisions that have to be taken, many pros and many cons. Why do it? Why not do it? But eventually some kind of a decision has to be taken. Israel for years and years, more than a decade, has done everything possible not to send, maybe since 2014, 9 years since Operation Protective Edge, has done practically everything possible not to send ground forces into Gaza. When you don't deal with the problem when it's smaller, here it comes and gets you once it gets much bigger.
Ariel Saron still here with us as well. There are reports of some specific Israeli Air Force targets in the Gaza Strip that are triggering some responses from Hamas officials. What are we hearing?
Right, Ellie. So as part of these ongoing Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, one of the targets was the Palestine Tower in El Riman neighborhood in central Gaza. This is a building that has over 100 apartments inside of it. And Abu Ubaida, the military spokesperson for the El Qassam Brigades, that's the military wing of Hamas, even though today there are one big military wing, saying that now that the occupation has bombed the Palestine Tower, Tel Aviv must stand on one foot and await our earth-shattering response. Add to that, Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, saying that this is just the beginning of the war, we will extend it to the West Bank, to Jerusalem. They're trying to set the scene that this is just the beginning. that we are moving towards ongoing escalation. This is also what Netanyahu told Biden, and so we shouldn't be surprised if indeed this is not going to take more than this will take more than just a few hours and days.
And before we conclude this hour, Hamda Salhout, 24 News correspondent down south in the border city of Sderot. Hamda, what is the situation there on the ground?
Ellie, heavy gunfire happening in the city of Sderot, as well as several interceptions overhead, loud booms heard in the distance. We were actually also able to see the Israeli military transporting a body from the city of a dead civilian inside of Sderot. You'll remember that just this morning at 6:30, Hamas launching that surprise attack heavily in the city of Sderot. More than 20 hostage situations. The Israeli military confirming several hostages, among them Israeli military members inside of the Gaza Strip. Heads of Hamas are saying that this is only the beginning and they are prepared for the worst. The Israeli Security Cabinet convening this evening, talking about what the next steps are. But Hamas is saying they're prepared for every possible scenario, and the worst possible scenario would be a ground invasion in Gaza, and for that they say they're prepared.
Yes, Hamda, situation on the ground still very much active. That's an understatement with the lack of a better wording this hour. Hamda Salhout with the rest of the I-24 News team there on the ground. Stay safe. Thank you for this. We will be back with you later on in the evening. Of course, Avi Melamed, in the short time we have left before we need to wrap up this hour, what are we to expect within the frameworks of today?
Escalation. Massive escalation. We are looking at a very long period of escalation, lots of ramifications. We should very much well be tuned to the possibility that we will find ourselves in a massive all-out war inside Gaza Strip.
All right, gentlemen, Jonathan Regev, Mr. Avi Melamed, Ariel Osseron, thank you very much for this. We will be back at the top of the hour as we continue our rolling coverage here. Israel is at war. A coordinated Hamas attack from the early hours of this morning, what seems to be just the very beginning of a prolonged campaign with all options on the table. No other way to put it. Over 1,000 Israelis injured, over 100 Israelis confirmed dead.